Gray suit protection. Ellis unit guards admit assaulting prisoners but aren't held accountable. By Jason Renard Walker. Introduction. Want to know how a government in a given country treats its society? Look in its prisons. In this controlled and often world, the guard is only a mirror reflection of law enforcement personnel, while the prisoner reflects the individual they're sent to monitor and control, usually adopting the most heinous methods in which to achieve the former and the latter ends. The abusive tactics citizens are subjected to outside prison walls is only a microcosm of what's actually going on inside of prisons, and what is differentiated by the fact that one side of the fence is catching the murders and abusive treatment on camera, while the other side isn't. Or so they say. The Ellis unit is one of those controlled torture units and a prime example of qualified immunity at its best. Here, it's not the prisoners who are reporting being assaulted, but rather the guards, who are ever so proud to admit that their use of force and assaultive behavior had nothing to do with restoring order, but instead disrupt it. Within this piece lies several verifiable examples of prisoners who were assaulted by a guard that admitted doing so and were punished, while the guard received nothing more than congratulations and slaps on the back. What this epidemic has resulted in is an attack now ask questions later attitude and culture that's being deployed throughout the prison and accessible to any guard brave enough to admit what's described here. Double jeopardy punishment. What do I myself have in common with prisoners? Caturian Dwayne Backus, Juarez Fidencio Jr., and Echo. One way or another, we are all victims of the unit's gray suit protection, and received administrative punishment on top of being assaulted. On November 12, 2018, while Backus was standing on the stairs talking to Sergeant Lori B. Turley, a jealous officer, Josephat Cruzalta pushed Backus down the stairs, injuring his back in the process. Cruzalta rushed towards Backus with a cocked fist, but was popped in the mouth. Turley encouraged Cruzalta to not report the incident, since, in her view, Backus defended himself and she would write a statement. Cruzalta wrote an assault case anyways, and even admitted that he instigated the incident. Backus was found guilty at the disciplinary hearing by Michael G. Hill, who advised him in the future to not fight back, but ball up. If Backus was killed, he said, TDCJ would pay for the funeral. Backus was sent to solitary confinement for the crime of protecting his life and liberty. Gray suit protection. Towards the end of October 2018, Officer Rodney D. Jones III, a young black gunslinger, amplified a minor altercation with a prisoner who goes by Alabama. In front of the cell block door control picket, Jones grabbed Alabama by the jacket and popped him in the mouth several times. A white guard who had no knowledge of what happened sprayed Alabama in the face with gas, and non-resisting Alabama was handcuffed, given an assault case, then sent to lockup. Jones came back to work the next day, marveled by the fact that Head Warren Kelly Strong commended him not for using justified force, but for being able to justify his assault. Jones was awarded a more prestigious job assignment, while Alabama was sent to close custody hearing. His crime? Refusing to go to his cell. Jones uses this particular incident as momentum to strut up and down the hallway like a rooster in front of a henhouse. On December 7, 2018, around 3:31 a.m., Juarez experienced his share of abuse. In effort to protest Officer C. Morris denying another prisoner his breakfast, Morris opened all the cell block windows so that the freezing air sucked into our cells to mix with the cold air blasting out of cell vents. Close to 30 minutes later, Morris grabbed a bucket full of ice-cold water, then doused an unsuspecting Juarez and his personal property, then doused himself too, then reported he'd been assaulted. Though cameras are on the cell block, Here can see the cell doors or catch a guard entering a cell. Surveillance cameras point straight forward and cannot see beyond the entrance, which requires several steps to meet the cell door. Basically, the cell is inside a bigger space, and a prisoner could be killed by a guard and no visual proof would be available to verify who entered the cell. Captain Clifton removed all of Juarez's containers, put him on food loaf meals for a week, then had Morris write disciplinary reports for assault and burning a paper bag. Morris admitted to the dousing but claimed he was putting the fire out, which he'd stomped out well before he sought the bucket. The only place with water was on Morris and in Juarez's cell. I assume water tossing is a normal act here on F-Pod. The short time I've been here, I've seen 3 guards use water tossing as punishment, with the last tossing, I'll note, being the most animated. 12/1/18 around 12:16 p.m., Echo and Officer Barfield exchanged insults, getting under his skin. Barfield said he'd be back, then left. He passed my cell carrying a bucket of smoking hot water. The sound of a splash and Barfield claiming victory were heard in the epitome of a loud scream. Echo was put on a week of food loaf, but didn't receive the assault case because Barfield forgot to wet himself. I personally sent out several reports about being assaulted by Brandon K. Pollock, Zachary Williford, and others. The last portion of the disciplinary hearing was held December 11th, 2018, and of course I was found guilty. Pollock gave his story of the events, but somehow left out the flurry of punches he threw at me. He claimed he accidentally hit me with the door, then I held up my fist like I would hit him. According to Pollock, he gave me several chances to put my fist down and leave. I didn't, so he felt threatened, grabbed me, and end of story, I'm left-handed, but he claimed to have been struck by my right hand. Under cross-examining, he admitted to hitting me with punches, but never mentioned why he used them, or the amount of force he used. He noted that the phantom punch scroll his left eye, photos were taken, medical care saw it, and numerous witnesses saw it. None of this documentary evidence was present, and when I asked about it, the hearing officer, Hill, claimed he had no control over where it's at, and seemed not to care if it even existed. And then there's a reference to the disciplinary case number listed there. I was found guilty based on the officer's report and testimony, but Hill never explained why my witnesses and evidence held no weight against here. The disciplinary report noted Pollock had no injuries, but in his testimony he had to get medical care for a swollen eye and unverified assertion. Hannah Wiley, a reporter for the news organization The Texas Tribune, reached out to me in response and tend to collect data for a future story. Those who'd read about what happened began reaching out as well. This clip from Cron.com, official website for the Houston Chronicle, sent from a source, stood out the most. And this is the quote. The Texas Prison Systems Office of the Inspector General has launched a criminal probe after 2 Telford unit workers admitted to falsifying inmate records in an apparent effort to improve disciplinary statistics at the Northeast Texas lockup. Just think, Telford unit head warden Garth Parker called me a lying motherfucker when a supporter filed an ombudsman complaint on this same issue. I'd complained about this back in July 2018. Who's lying now? Typically, the counsel substitute, disciplinary hearing officer, and appeal reviewing warden are those who have interest in and power to manipulate disciplinary statistics. I was written a false case and the hearing was held beyond me knowing I had a case. When I received punishment in the mail, I spoke to Warden Marshall and requested a review of the pod camera to show I wasn't served a case, or ever spoke to counsel substitute Sheila Forte. Obviously, he did. When I tried to appeal the decision to exhaust state remedies, the grievance was sent back as non-grievable because the case number didn't exist. But the original case with Forte and the hearing officer's signature on it tell a different story. This is one example of techniques used at Telford Unit to conceal due process violations, block litigants from raising the issue in court, and wiping evidence out of the statistical database. The good cop and consequences of an action. Most importantly, moments after the incident, another FPOD prisoner wrote a sworn affidavit about a conversation he heard Pollock having with other guards. In this statement, Pollock asked another guard to bear false witness to whatever Pollock said happened, and that he and Williford tried to break my jaw and knock my teeth out. The officer refused to bear false witness to bullshit. But even worse, this officer obviously never reported the incident to a higher authority. But why? In a corrupt institution, there is always the good cop, or one who thinks of himself as having a consistent personality every day he/she works. But this consistency is only in their minds, and rarely do they put principle before self-interest in their day-to-day gatherings. They're not the same working alone than with ranking staff, a group of guards, or a sadistic coworker. Their actions are purely based on the need to coexist in each setting, avoid retaliation or termination, and protect themselves as one who does their job impartially, nothing more. They'll often look the other way, falsify paperwork, and switch up accordingly. To appease each group, they'll justify writing cases and reporting coworkers by claiming rank made them do it, and a certain prisoner's potential to snitch gave them no choice. They're more dangerous than the abusers because their acts and failure to act are done in good faith by the observer, but in reality they are self-centered, unpredictable, opportunistic double agents. On a microcosm level, to the act of doing nothing when something is required, breed events and catastrophes such as mass murders and genocide, while keeping the flame lit, like in Rwanda, Bosnia, and the Jim Jones People's Temple congregation. These same individuals are the ones who never interfere when their co-workers beat up and kill minorities on the streets and in interrogation rooms. At the same time, the pressure to conform are great, to be one of us, not to be a liability that risks the system getting confronted. Keeping a code of silence is often the top-down power of authority, sending unwritten expectations indirectly to the subordinates, advising that unconstitutional and criminal behavior is acceptable, but only under special circumstances which they define and on a need-to-do basis. A lot of the recently exposed scandals at the highest levels of business, government, and in the military involve the lethal mix of unspoken authority expectations that are subliminally passed down to new arrivals who want to be accepted in the inner circle, with the tacit approval of numerous silent partners. Ellis Unit's Lieutenant Kimbrough is a prime example, as he had an entire night shift of rogues abusing prisoners, destroying property, and writing trumped-up disciplinary reports as part of policy and enforced compliance. Sergeant Warner, Sergeant Morning, Sergeant Brooks, and Sergeant Grace are others who have created a system that ensures false disciplinary reports are processed and unchallengeable. According to prisoners, these officials avoid exposure because those they manipulate remain silent. But history has shown that the silent partners are normally those responsible, destroying the same chaos they play blind to, by out of necessity assuming the ignorant whistleblower role. As what I exposed in The Good Cop, their focus isn't on doing the right thing, but doing what's right to receive lesser of the punishment. I give a revolutionary salute to each and every one of you who have assisted me in espousing this evil system, and a very special thanks to those who have no self-interest to the side to take part in a struggle that requires rising love, imitating gangsters that rule over us, and siding with real comrades to fight the real enemies. And this is the address for Jason, so if you guys want to send a letter or write to him, this is where you can reach him. I think he could probably use some letters of support right now, so please be sure to send him a letter.